Summer 924 Osrith waited in the hall as the Lady of Bibbenberg set to work to help with the stricken survivors of the Norse attack. She waited as the men were brought in, fed and the fires banked to stave off hypothermia. The fortress, Osrith's old home, became full of the busyness that she remembered when she was small, when her mother and Elfric prepared for guests. She was forgotten, which was exactly what Osrith wanted, for she had felt awkward enough riding over to see the Lady Edith, and now she had hospitality to offer. Osrith watched as her brother strode in, organizing the men, and stood by the window in the alcove, where she and Weir had once sat, watching. It was only when Sihtric, Uted's man, noticed she was there that there was a change in the feel of the room. "Lady Osrith!" he exclaimed, when he saw her standing out of the way by the window. "What help is needed?" Osrith asked. "A lot of the crew only speak Gaelish," Sihtric told her. And she followed him over to where the crew, battered and bruised, with possible fractures, were being treated. Edith, of course, organizing Bibbenberg's hall as if it were a hospital. "Which men need help?" Osrith asked, and Osferth tentatively escorted her to two men with head injuries. "What happened?" she asked, "and what help do you need?" "Uisj," he said, and raised a hand to his head. "The jaboom caught my head." "Osferth, both of those men need water." "Osferth," Osrith told him. And she moved to another man. He was coughing, and when he looked up, Osrith realized she was looking up into a face she knew. "Finnenbeek," she exclaimed, and knelt to hug her son Mather. He replied, and asked her why she was there. "To pay my neighborly respects," she told him, and then watched him glance to the far wall. It was Domhnall, and she kissed her son's head before pacing over to him. "What happened?" Osrith asked. "Well, I saw," she added, "two Norse, acting together, I think," Domhnall told her, as she sat beside him. "We all got away." He looked back to young Finan and they watched as he received a stone beaker, which might have contained Uisj, but, from the smell, more likely contained Uisj Beether. "Go to him," Domhnall told her. "I am well," he added, and took her hand in his for a moment and squeezed it gently. "I was coming to you, Mather," Finnenbeek told her, and they continued in Gaelish, as she asked about Edru and about his studies at the monastery before choosing to learn to sail in Domhnall's fleet. "Your own choice?" "Constantine has not sent you away?" she asked. "Oh no!" young Finan exclaimed, in the same bright, confident tone of Edra. "I have learned to fight better. I wanted to show you." Domhnall said he could drop anchor and row me to Berwick, but we were attacked. "She listens, then," Uted said, when his friend's surprised eyes rested on Osrith. "Edith tells me that she came this morning to simply do as you asked." "To be neighborly," Finan told him, glancing as the servants brought up food. And then he crossed to Osrith, who smiled in astonishment when before her was her husband. "Son," he said to young Finan, who smiled to his father, "I would just like some company with your mother." He held out a hand and Osrith took it, and they went into the hallway, and out, by the stair, and made Osrith's heart jump when he pulled her to him and began to kiss her. "I love you," he told her, "and I thank you for coming," but, he broke off and looked out to the sea. The tide was coming in and the grey sea was inching closer. "Why are you here?" "Because you asked me to come to be neighborly with the Lady of Bibbenbuth, and I came." She looked at his dark brown eyes, and added, cautiously, "Why?" "Because there is now a lot of things going on that are dangerous," Finan told her. "Aethelstan will be crowned and he will rule Northumbria. And we were going to Mercia." Osrith gave him a look, and Finan added, sheepishly, "I was going to ride to Yer and tell Yer," he insisted. Osrith smiled, and put her hands on his body. If they were not at Bibbenberg, and there was not a rescue party being helped, Osrith might have slid herself down Finan's body, his breeches coming with her, held onto his buttocks and blown him until he came. Instead, she put her head to his chest. "But he's going, because Aethelstan cannot get into Bibbenberg," Osrith pointed out. "Uted's oath," Finan said, simply. "He believes himself to be the rightful king of not only Mercia, but Wessex, and by default Sent and East Anglia," Finan told her. "He has declared Northumbria, and is overlord to Strathclyde." "My Strathclyde," if Edru is to be believed, Osrith thought, and you think next is, where? Finan did not answer. Instead, he told her about Ethestarn's piety and his gifts to St. Cuthbert at Dunham, a little Northumbrian respect, and he would be winning with the Christian Saxons. So there is going to be a civil war in Wessex and Mercia, Osrith concluded, and 2 young princes involved. Finan told her, kissing her forehead. I will take young Finan home. He needs to be kept out of this. She felt her husband's deep intake of breath and then nod. We can go now, Osrith told him. Give me 2 horses and we will leave. Good, Finan told her, and he took her body close to his, and pressed his lips to hers. There was no mistaking that just her kiss was turning him on. But then they broke off, for there was clamoring in the hall. Discordant voices talking over one another. And at the center of the commotion was coming Domhnall's voice. Finan stepped from Osrith to find Uhtred, who was standing in the middle of his own hall arguing with the commander of the ship whose crew he had just saved. Lord Uhtred, Domhnall was saying, perhaps we can come to an arrangement suitable for my king and yourself. There was once a time when Bibbenberg and Alba were allied. That was an arrangement held with my cunt of a cousin. Uhtred shot back. What are you to me anyway? What are you to my sister? At this, her brother had turned, and noticed Osrith. He pointed a finger to her. I am Osrith's family by her choice, Domhnall said, carefully. And Finan here is my brother through marriage, and I say I trust him more than I trust you, you Gaelish bastard. But, Uhtred continued, arms folded, I am willing to let you go, once you are supped. And you can take one of my ships. Domhnall nodded, and praised him for his generosity. Osrith, the Lady of Bibbenberg, exclaimed, and when they turned she saw Eadith swoop over to her. Please, sit with us. We are to feed our guests. And Osrith sat beside her, in silence born of lack of things to say, watching the crew eat and recover. Lord Domhnall, I am sorry to hear about your loss in Irian, Finan told him. Domhnall turned, and nodded to Finan. Murchada is now High King, he told Finan. And the afternoon was spent organizing the crew to sail a new ship, extracing a promise that it should be sent it back when they had got home. Then it is agreed, my nephew will accompany you, and bring back the ship with one of Constantine's own. When all had been consumed and the crew were ready, Uhtred led the Alba sailors out by the Seagate Passage and over the sand. 2 ships were indeed waiting. One of them being the Sparrowhawk, Uhtred's own ship. The other, presumably the one which he was gifting to Domhnall, was displaying a wolf's head, Uhtred's standard. It was Osrith who noticed first that the second ship was the Trinity. She was in front, near her brother, when she noticed the small cross nailed to the prow of the ship. It was an Irian cross. She turned to Uhtred. By what authority are you in the sea? Osrith's demanded to know. When my fishing fleets go missing, and yours do not, he told her, irritatedly. Perhaps mine know the sea better. He gave her a foul look. I had a man, a good man, who had been killed and was ashore. It was clear he had been tortured before being killed. Uhtred turned to Domhnall, who was close behind them. Your work? He asked. The dismemberment of one of my fishermen? No, Lord Uhtred, Domhnall said, eyes widening to this hostility when they had spent a good few hours being treated as guests. Osrith watched the wind blow against her friend's damp hair. Or your king? No, Lord Uhtred, Domhnall repeated. No, Lord Uhtred, Uhtred imitated. So I set out to trap for those responsible. And who do I find it is behind it? The Lord Ethelelm, Uhtred told them. Surely, began Domhnall. Not Ethelelm himself, you fool, Uhtred snapped. Our attack was somewhat different, Domhnall pointed out. We had Norse. But Uhtred was striding over the sand to him, and leaned close to him. No, he told Domhnall, we found that he sent a trusted warrior by the name of Warmund, and it turns out he wanted to capture me. Domhnall looked at him. It was clear to Osrith he knew the name Warmund. He hacked out Jeck's eyes, and his tongue, and cut each of his fingers and toes off before he died. He paced around Domhnall, his eyes never leaving his face. So you will tell your king this attack did not work and that any alliance he has made with Ethelelm will fail. For he knew where the Alba ships went. They treated with Ethelelm agreements that Alba would be an ally of Wessex, possibly even sub-Regulus. And for this, Ethelm's ships would have safe passage, as would Constantine's. Which is why Utad had given money to Bergskulla. This should be more than enough blood money, when you take it to them. Utad HS he glanced at the sea where, rather than being sink the Trinity was being brought to Bibbenberg's harbour. Tell them my sister's debt to your family has been paid by me. So we are borrowing Constantine's flagship, he had told Finan, earlier that day, dropping a friendly arm around his Irishman's shoulder. And the crew? Finan had asked. They can bloody well walk back, for all I care, Utad retorted, and then glanced back to the bedraggled Domhnall. That captain, is he one of Constantine's men? The cousin? He is surely, Finan replied. He knew Osrith well when he was young. What? Utad had exclaimed. He's the bastard Irishman who once humped my sister? Not humped, Finan corrected him. All right then, Utad conceded, shrugging. Not humped. He could come to an accident off the top of the cliffs. Finan smiled. Not today, he told Utad, but keep him away from me or I will be skewering the bastard. And now the bastard stood there, watching his crew board. Utad watched as he held back, allowing his men to board first. And you, Utad urged young Finan. And you? He said to Osrith, you will need to go back to Berwick. It happened so fast after that Osrith could not believe her eyes. Finan and Utad jumped in with them, and Cedric let go of the painter, while one of the Pitlanders steered. Utad, Osrith exclaimed. What are you doing? She looked to the beach, where Domhnall was breaking into a run. But one of Utad's men, Hayard, tore after him. He caught him in a hold and put his sword to Domhnall's throat. The crew were staring, in silence. Please no, Osrith begged, pushing past Finan and standing next to Utad. Brother, do not kill him. No, Utad, I ask you for little, do not kill that man, Finan also put in. But he ignored his friend and looked down to Osrith. Is he dear to you? Utad asked, mockingly. He is, Osrith admitted, refusing to look at Finan. Silence followed, where no one moved or spoke, and she watched as Utad raised a hand. Then, he withdrew it. Oh, all right, Utad said with a laugh, showing it was a game was up. Behind her, Berg was raising the red hand of Ulster, Domhnall's standard, which he had liberated from the Trinity after the crew were safely inside Bibbenberg. It was to be their foil, their trick, Osrith realized. For, if what her brother said was true, and Constantine had entered into an alliance with Ethelm, then disguising their flags would mean safe passage to wherever they were going. But, it was not over yet. Hayard was saying something to Domhnall, who kept glancing over to Utad. Then, he left his armor, his sword and his mail on the beach. A few moments later, under the encouragement of sword point and another glance, off came his shirt and boots. Hayard was laughing and gestured to his breeches. You are a complete cunt, you know that. Osrith shouted angrily as Domhnall stood on the beach stark naked. Good, I like cunts, he told Osrith, gleefully. There, he told Finan as Osrith glanced to Domhnall. He was big, Osrith thought, long, and broad, like Constantine, like Finan. Look, she is surprised at what she sees. Utad, groaned Finan, and Osrith turned to her brother, feeling an idiot to think she might be able to start to trust him. I saw you look, Utad accused Osrith. If you make a man strip naked in your beach without warning, of course I will see. Utad turned to Finan. Your wife has never seen that cock before, he concluded, clearly enjoying himself. You had nothing to worry about, my friend. Ha! Not even his red hand will help him, Utad added, and Osrith looked up, to see the wolf banner had been replaced with Ulster's ancient symbol. I am disappointed. I thought he would be blue, Utad continued. And when the usual quip from Finan did not come, Utad filled the silence. I suppose he will go blue with cold before long. And now you are imprisoning him? Osrith asked as Domhnall's naked back view retreated over the beach. No, Utad her cheerfully. Hayard will be pointing out which way it is to Alba and his bastard king. He can walk.